At the window, her face ruddy with excitement, dreamy 10-year-old Celine Mars anticipated her close encounter with the Duke's receiver. Stars of anticipation sparkled in her eyes like magical fireworks, illuminating her childish soul in anticipation of the great moment. In that moment, her imagination became wings soaring like a bird of freedom, ready for new adventures. Parallel to her daydreams, Celine was delving into her training with a serious look, eager to acquire the skills of her father, the Night Protector Duke Willow. As a future guardian, she succumbed to a whirlwind of perseverance, like a whirlwind of dreams in which images of knightly feats and the splendor of valor flashed. Thus, amidst the light of her dreams and the gleam of steel blades, a new chapter in the story of Celine Mars was born. Smiling Celine, her eyes wandering over the horizon of the future, suddenly stopped, immersed in thoughts of who was destined to be her Night Protector. Her childish imagination conjured up images of upcoming feats like pages of unwritten chronicles, and she eagerly dreamed of becoming the guardian of the next Duke of the noble House of Willow, Mr. Demian. The current Duke of Willow, the ruler of the northern lands, loomed before her imagination as a great lord. Celine's gaze rested on him respectfully, as if he were an impregnable mountain, and as she watched the strictness of his orders, she could not help but be struck, inwardly comparing him to her father. At that moment, the Duke seemed incredibly powerful, like the shadow of a great lion, and Celine looked at him with admiration, thinking of her own path to valor and glory. Celine, immersed in her musings, reflected that the future heir to such a powerful man would surely be magnificent, cool, muscular, strength shimmering in his gaze, and certainly no less serious than his venerable predecessor. And then, like magic, the creak of a carriage sounded, piercing the silence of the surrounding air. Celine looked up, and her heart began to beat with anticipation as the Duke's long-awaited successor appeared on the horizon. Suddenly, her musings came to life like a swirling wind, bringing with it an aura of mystery and change. Excited by the moment, Celine, like a rushing wind, rushed toward her guest in a flash, ignoring the admonitions that sounded behind her back, reminding her to maintain decorum at such exciting moments. The words of those around her rained down on her like a downpour, asserting that the Duke's successor was a marvelous creature, and at that moment she firmly believed that the future master of her heart would be no less awesome than Duke Willow. Images of the majestic feats so characteristic of a true leader were already looming in her mind, and Celine sped up in anticipation of future events, as if eager to catch the magical moment that would soon unfold before her eyes. A strikingly graceful young heir stepped out of the luxurious carriage like a ghost, mesmerized by his extraordinary elegance. His steps seemed like a dance, and his clothes radiating sophistication, like an orchestra of magic notes. A wave of excitement crossed Celine's and Damien's gazes, and in the same instant the girl's eyes widened as if a magic spell had worked on her. A shy beauty flashed across her cheeks, emphasizing the momentary defeat before the magic of the majestic receiver. Despite her initial admiration, however, the sight of Damien seemed somewhat disappointing to her, like a mysterious epilogue in a book she had abruptly finished. There was a noticeable sense of different expectations in this moment of collision between the two worlds, which perhaps gave the encounter an unpredictable twist. All of Celine's anticipation, like a fragile mirror, shattered instantly, leaving only shards of expectation in the air, like tiny particles of experience. The picture she'd painted for herself collapsed like a house of cards, subjected to a sudden gust of wind. Step by step, they drew closer to each other, and in a moment, when the distance became almost invisible, Celine looked at the smiling Demian and couldn't hold back her question. "Why are you smiling?" she asked, and his voice resounded in response, marked with surprise. Something unknown flashed in this unpredictable situation that he thought was surprising, like a mysterious star in the new firmament of their meeting. Celine glanced at the Duke's successor. She remembered her father's words warning her against arrogance and urging her to serve with loyalty no matter who became her lord. Those admonitions echoed in her ears like the golden rules of chivalry, and now she was going to follow them no matter how Damien's character revealed itself. The moment their paths crossed, Celine knew that something important lay in this encounter, something that demanded not only her loyalty but also her respect for the will of fate. She decided to approach this challenge with dignity, ready to serve, as her father had predicted, with the selfless loyalty and integrity of a knight, even if the enigmatic Damien was not what he seemed at first glance. Celine, accepting her inescapable position, decided that it was her knightly duty to make up for the qualities that her new master might lack. She came to the decision that as a knight, it was up to her to show stamina and loyalty by supporting Damien in areas where he lacked. With an elegant curtsy, Celine finally greeted her new master with undeniable nobility. She stood before him with a kind gaze and a respectful smile, as is proper in chivalric tradition. However, no matter how much she gazed at the frail boy before her, she still found it hard to believe that this young successor was truly meant to take on the burden of the Duke's authority and responsibility. Celine, immersed in thought, realized that the main mystery was not Damien's handsome face or lean body, but rather the mysterious radiation of his smile. It seemed to her that this smile carried something unpleasant, as if she had tasted bread with too much butter pleasant, but giving her a strange feeling. Celine mentally berated herself for the fact that Damien's smile made her cringe, like the taste of a bad dish. Meanwhile, Damien continued to smile as he gazed at Celine and pondered the fact that she was the kind of person who could easily read on her face what was occupying them. They both seemed to be involved in their own worlds of thought, whose boundaries were just beginning to show. A sudden insight lit up Celine's mind, and she quickly asked if the Duke's current successor lived in the capital. Damien only nodded in response, confirming her assumption. That moment brought an unexpected pang of sadness to her. The sudden conjecture that someone might have bullied the fragile Damien gripped her heart like a shadow that dimmed the shining light of previous impressions. In that moment, Celine felt a strong sympathy for the boy in the successor's chair, and determination took her even tighter in its grip. Damien's gaze visibly saturated with the nuances of complex feelings as he carefully re-questioned whether he had understood Celine correctly. Her answer, full of assurance, stirred even more mystery in his gaze. Celine unashamedly affirmed that her assumption was based on her perception of Damien's strange smile. The Duke's successor, clearly surprised by her statement, could not refrain from asking her what she thought was so unusual. So began their conversational duel in which words became swords, and each answer brought them closer to uncovering the secret behind the mysterious smile. Celine, in response to Damien's question, resolutely resorted to gestures, using her hands to create a strange facial expression. This audacious display of theatrical expression caused Damien to burst into unexpected laughter. His laughter rang out like the harmony of a merry melodrama, diluting moments of mystery and tension. At that moment, despite the differences in their perception of a smile, Celine and Damien found in a moment of laughter a certain union of humor that bound them in a dance of varied emotions. Suddenly, Celine resolutely declared that in their land, such a smile was reserved only for those who could not face the challenges of life, and she promised Damien that she would not tell anyone about his suffering, keeping it a secret. Damien looked away, inwardly agreeing with this favorable lie, seeing it as a convenient cloak protecting him from uncomfortable questions. He only nodded in response, confirming her assumptions. With respect in her voice, Celine, full of admiration, declared that she had no difficulty in recognizing such a situation, as she was certainly an expert in such matters. At this time, Damien did not dare to shatter her confidence, finding it easier to accept the mask she had created to ease him of the burden of her strange feeling. Celine, like a mentor, in a quiet, comforting voice, remarked that Damien should not be shy, for it was not a sin to be weak. Her words sounded like wisdom, embedded not only in caring but also in understanding human vulnerability. But in response to this poignant moment, Damien himself burst into laughter, like a mirthful stream breaking through the sadness. His laughter was not only ironic, but also touching in the face of Celine's naivete. The tears that came to his eyes spoke of the mixed feeling of peace and laughter at this unexpected prospect of naivete. However, Celine, noticing the tears in Damien's eyes, decided they were tears of sadness, and as if opening dark chapters of his past, began to make up horrible things that might have happened in his life. Shadows of mysterious riddles and unknown trials flashed through her stories like the pages of a dark novel. Suddenly, as if providing him with a life-saving breath, she handed him a handkerchief and offered him a seat on the bench. Her words sounded like a gentle reminder to Damien not to be too hard on himself, for he had no choice in determining who he had to become. In that moment, it was as if Celine had become his support, promising that the mixed palette of his feelings was not something he should reproach himself for. Celine, inspired by a desire to support Damien, began to affectionately comfort him, asserting that if he made the effort, he could become at least 1/10 as great as his father. However, sweeping away her own words, she reconsidered her assertion and adjusted, by 1/30. Damien, in turn, buried his face in the handkerchief Celine had given him to hide his laughter from her gaze. His laughter, as if hidden under the handkerchief, burst out, giving this awkward scene an incredible comic coloring. In that moment, their interactions seemed to become a dance of the senses, where each step revealed a new layer of their understanding. Suddenly, Celine put her hand over her heart and said, with favor in her voice, that she was ready to give Damien all the help he needed. Her words sounded like a solemn vow, filled with a willingness to support him on the road to his own success. Damien, however, finally calmed his laughter and expressed his curiosity by asking Celine why she was going to help him. At this point, there was a shadow of misunderstanding in their dialogue, as if they were on the verge of discovering each other, and each successive question brought a new element of mystery to their relationship. Celine, with a sense of chivalrous duty, proclaimed that, according to her father's precepts, it was her duty to help Damien by stepping into the role of future knight protector. She asserted that no hardship would stop her, and she would be by his side in any difficult situation. Damien, grateful for such loyalty, inquired how she was going to do it. Celine, with her natural optimism, said that she would find ways and solutions no matter how difficult it was. There was not only determination in her words, but also confidence that she could protect her future master in any circumstance. Celine curiously asked Damien how long he had been here for, to which he replied that his visit was for a month. With surprise in her voice, she said that a month was only a short period. The next moment, she rose from the bench with an expression of polite solemnity and said that it was time for her to go. There was something mysterious in these words, as if a vague anxiety had been awakened in her heart at the coming change. To Damien's surprise, Celine spoke words of comfort, urging him not to be upset, for tomorrow they would have the opportunity to meet again. There was hope in her voice, as if she were anticipating something important in the upcoming meeting. Damien, struck by the suddenness and proximity of their next meeting, expressed his surprise. Celine, in response, looked ahead with a certain determination and said that they didn't have much time left to make the boy stronger. In these words, there was a confidence in the necessity of joint efforts, as if they had an important mission before them in building strength and resilience. Celine slipped away, presenting her farewells to Damien, while the young man himself, consumed with mixed emotions, sank into contemplation over the words she had uttered. As he pondered, he plunged into the depths of his thoughts, as if in a labyrinth of thought, where each idea was like a branch leading to uncharted vistas. A picture was forming in his mind of the impossibility of anyone daring even to think of subjecting Duke Willow's successor to bullying. It was like a violation of sacred law, like an attack on the pillar of the central nobility, where the Duke was the embodiment of power, and his successor the heir to greatness, bearing the burden of an entire family. When it comes to Damien Willow, one inevitably draws a portrait of a brilliant swordsman whose talent was recognized even in the capital's most noble academy. He has never been defeated in tournaments and duels, ignoring even the glances of powerful nobles despite his young age. He is a true talent, shimmering with the light of glory, deserving a place at the top of the hierarchy as the Duke's successor. Celine, the first to meet his gaze, had a look of distaste on her face. Damien, for his part, could have spoken sternly to her about her disappointment, but there was a restless joy flickering in his eyes, and while it would have been possible to call out seriousness in response to her expression, it seemed to him that it was only a small part of the motley carnival to be played out. Damien, convinced that he would be incredibly bored in this place, found himself pleasantly surprised. To him, the foreshadowing of the untold fun he was playing out as a wimp became like a rousing melody revealing endless possibilities. Last night, in the dark abode of a carriage bound for the gloomy Willow Castle, the Duke, glancing stealthily at Damien, decided to inquire when the young man intended to return to the capital. Damien replied that he hadn't made a final decision yet, for the vacation had just begun, and the anticipation of uncharted adventures kept him pleasantly excited. The Duke, noticing the slight infidelity in his son's gaze, suggested that Damien look away and admire the powerful horses that straightened their manes in the wind, but the young heir apologized with a smile, claiming he had an appointment he could not miss. Over the course of a short dialogue, it became clear that Damien's appointment was with Celine Mars. Suddenly, there was a light joke from Damien, who noted that such a lovely creature as Celine had a name as perfect as the key to the treasury. My father, reacting to the unexpected turn of the conversation, remarked with a smile that apparently the horses would remain in the stall today, and the walk with them would take place at another, more appropriate moment. The next day, Damien met Celine, who looked surprisingly far from the stereotypical aristocratic look. She was dressed in simple, uncluttered clothes, as if she embodied the modesty and unpretentiousness of village life. With a smile appropriate to etiquette, Damien began the conversation, praising the girl's style and choice of clothing. However, Celine, ignoring the irony in his words, went straight to her own question, as if not noticing the superficial greetings. Celine turned in amazement, wondering suddenly why Damien had reappeared before her in his fine clothes. Her eyes flashed with curiosity, like spring sunshine through thick foliage. As if Providence had told her that this moment would come, she answered his puzzled gaze masterfully, as if expecting something more. Without waiting for a clue, Celine had clearly prepared for this turn of events, and with amazing foresight provided him with a magnificent outfit. Like dewdrops on flower petals, she carefully created an atmosphere of change, making Damien change clothes as if he were entering a new chapter of his life. Celine, with an expression on her face, suggested to Damien a change at the training session, emphasizing that it was risky to knead mud in new clothes. However, Damien responded with a subtle hint of naivety, asking if it was impossible to do without the change and keep the outfit clean. Without wasting a moment, Celine replied bluntly and uncompromisingly that of course not. With a slight smile, she explained that if Damien allowed the slightest stain on his new clothes, he would get a nasty look from his mother. Damien, for his part, held back a chuckle like a mysterious beehive ready to explode with pleasure. His inner world was churning, for the Duke's son could not imagine being reprimanded for such insignificant details. Damien sighed like the last breeze before sunset, and with a smile shimmering with rays of tenderness, announced that he had made the decision to change after all, promising to return in the shortest possible time. However, at that moment, Celine suddenly stopped the boy like a sudden whirlwind sweeping through the summer thickets and asked him to head to the bushes for a change of clothes so as not to take up much precious time. The sudden demand knocked Damien off his feet like a sudden lightning strike in a clear sky. His eyes widened like lightning-struck trees, and there was a flicker of bewilderment in them, as if he had encountered something completely unpredictable. A shadow of shock flashed across Damien's face like the mysterious glow of lightning suddenly piercing the dark sky. His inner world was overwhelmed by vague feelings, like the depths of the ocean turbidly agitated by a sudden rising storm. Celine, for all her determination, said she would turn away like a veil of secrecy, allowing him to retain some intimacy as he changed clothes. Damien sighed heavily and went into the bushes, quietly complaining about the torment that had befallen him since the morning, like rain that wouldn't stop for only moments. At last, with his difficulties overcome, Damien found himself in his new clothes, in spite of his inexperience in taking them off and putting them on himself, for the valet had always been his faithful guide in the world of fashion. Smiling, Damien immediately turned to ask Celine what he looked like in this so simple yet extraordinarily tangible garment. His eyes sparkled with anticipation, like stars in the night sky ready to light the path of the unknown. Celine's gaze strained like a string on a guitar as she noticed the oddity in the Duke's successor's appearance. This unforeseen mishap looked like a note falling out of place in a melody. It appeared that Damien, with his inexperience in the world of mundane details, had unwittingly worn his shirt backwards. The detail caught his eye, like a dim star in a constellation that stood out from the rest. Blushing, Damien went back to changing his clothes, this time with more careful attention to detail, and finally got the shirt on properly. His fingers glided deftly over the fabric like skilled notes in the art of music. He turned to Celine, smiling, asking what they would be doing, like a conversation with a precious friend. However, his addressing her as the daughter of Mars brought some tension into the air, like a shadow slipping across an idyllic landscape. Being addressed by her surname in such a manner strained Celine Mars, and she blurted out that Damien should not call her that, as if she could feel the ancient walls of her family castle crumbling from the wrong sounds. Celine suddenly said she wished Damien would just address her by her first name, as if it would be a new turn in their communication. Her voice sounded like a soft melody, like a call for harmony in their relationship, breaking into syllables like gentle waves on the shore. Demian jokingly pretended to remember her name, as if playing a game, but Celine, with a serious expression, insisted that he address her by her first name. Something deep flashed in her eyes like a mysterious shadow, as if she were revealing a part of her inner world to him. Immersed in thought, Damien began to ponder whether Celine realized that in the higher circles being addressed by first name was only acceptable in extremely close relationships. It was as if these reflections were intertwined with the shadows of the past, reflecting the complexities of established customs. He glanced at Selena, who was still annoyed at the mention of Daughter of Mars, and realized that she was probably unaware of such subtleties in high society. Damien's gaze became more perceptive, as if he was reading between the lines of her emotions, somewhere between the ornate rules and her own expectations. He smiled sweetly, giving in to Celine's wishes, and cheerfully stated that he agreed to call her by her first name. At this point, Celine, spreading her arms out to the sides like the epitome of a villainess, suggested they start hunting rabbits, as if anticipating the fun and adventure that awaited them. Demian, not quite sure if he had understood Celine correctly, asked again, to which she replied by mimicking a rabbit, putting her hands to her head in the shape of rabbit ears, demonstrating her purpose in this hunt. Immersed in a whirlwind of curiosity, Damien exclaimed to Celine, expressing a keen interest in the details of their unusual venture. In response to the question of how they were going to carry out their plans, Celine, with undeniable confidence, revealed a map of her skills, describing herself as a consummate master of traps. Her words rang out like a melody of skill, creating in Damien's imagination a vivid landscape of cunning tricks, clear and transparent as the rays of the sun in the clear sky. Of course, those words were lies. The forest, saturated with its wildlife, was a grave danger, and she had never been allowed into its embrace. Nevertheless, in school itself, Celine's talents were undeniable, becoming a notable bright light in her field. In her imagination, the forest stretched like a book in which every page held a mysterious story. With a furrowed brow, she claimed to be expert enough to brave the hunt like a magical adventure, where her unique abilities would be a trusted guide in this world of wilderness. Among the shining stars of society, such as Celine, who are considered the elite, there is an illusion that even hunting rabbits and setting a couple of traps becomes a simple and integral activity. However, as soon as the great Demian stepped over the threshold of the forest, he immediately sensed that what lay before him was not a settled expanse, but a magical symphony of wilderness. This realization swept over him like a sudden gust of wind, telling him that for children, venturing deep into these forests was an enterprise with an excessive amount of risk. As they penetrated deeper into the embrace of the forest's mystery, Celine scrutinized the majestic tree trunks until her eye caught a striking specimen that seemed the perfect candidate for a rabbit trap. With a confident gesture, she directed Damien behind the branches, pointing out the materials needed as precisely as a conductor raising his baton on a musical score. Celine herself took up the craftsmanship, squatting down to create an intricate trap from simple elements. Just a moment later, Damien returned carrying an impressive pile of twigs glistening in the setting sunlight, impressing even Celine with his agility. Taking the sticks in her hands, Celine sank into thought, like an artist gazing at a blank canvas before he began to create his work. Over the arsenal of wood in her hands, she meditated on how she could create a deft and effective trap from the variety. A smile played on Damien's face as he watched the confused Celine curiously. And suddenly, as if encapsulating his secret skills, he announced that he had been taught in detail the finer points of trap-making at the academy. This unexpected frankness thrilled Celine, giving her eyes a rapturous glow. Enthusiastic, she began to ponder the subtleties that distinguished the traps of the capital from those she had had to learn in the northern places where she had received her education. In this exchange of experience, a kaleidoscope of knowledge sparkled, each bend reflecting the unique aesthetics of trapping craftsmanship. After completing the traps, Celine took on the role of mentor, expertly talking about how to set them up properly, like a conductor raising his baton to create the melody of a safe hunt. At this time, Demian, weighing his observations in his mind, marveled at how Celine was blithely commanding, completely ignoring the social difference between them. After all, he, being the Duke's successor, is surely familiar with social norms and the influence of status. Nevertheless, he avoided any rebuke, not wanting to hurt her feelings and maintaining an atmosphere of agreement and understanding. Their journey deep into the forest continued, but suddenly Damien pulled Celine against him like a shadow, engulfing her like a sea with his determination, catching sight of the flashing ears of a rabbit beckoning with his running. The magical moment was disturbed by the specter of a frivolous rabbit tagging along on its tropical course. Realizing his prey was too easily spooked, Damien slowed his pulse like a falcon taking to the sky and clamped his mouth over Celine's, eyeing the unruly ears peeking out from behind the snow. Slowly and cautiously, they tried to sneak up on the rabbit in their icy path. Suddenly, however, the rabbit, like a wind in the snow, darted away, breaking the silence of the winter forest with its run. Celine, genuinely excited, immediately rushed after her prey, eager to reach the elusive rabbit. Suddenly stopping her eagerness, however, Damien quietly raised his hand, indicating the uncertain danger in this pursuit. To her indignant objections, he only smiled wisely and pronounced that it might be best not to pursue the rabbit in this situation. It flashed to Damien that there was something out of the ordinary in the world around him, and so he decided to lead Celine towards the exit of the forest, offering as if he had spotted a pair of rabbits more suitable for hunting. Celine, who also sensed that there was an unknown threat in the air, readily agreed. Together they set out on the artificial hunting trail, like two novices inexperienced in the intricate fun of rabbit hunting. The next morning, at Willow's exquisite castle, the Duchess pondered her son Damien's sudden decision to travel to Marion like a stained glass window of bright dawn. The splendor of these lands intrigued him once again, despite his earlier statements about the impossibility of discovering anything here that would be a source of his attention. The Duke of Willow, rising above the ordinary, announced that Damien was visiting a daughter from the noble house of Mars, the magnificent Selena. This unusual turn of events caused him to reflect on how the blood belonging to the Willow family breeds innumerable outstanding warriors. In this multifaceted society of military spiritual leaders, many of whom solemnly swore allegiance to the Willow family, the Duke pondered how a mighty legacy intertwines with the future. However, in this great poetic weave of knightly light, the status of Knight Protector inherent in the Mars family stood out with particular brilliance. Proclaimed by the Duke, this status foreshadowed the future, as if the prediction of a magical time petition. In the Duke's mind, pictures of the distant future flashed multifaceted. 10 years from now, when the crown of youth betrothed Selena, she would rise in the name of Damien as a knight defender, inscribing her name in the scroll of the Mars family's glory and intertwining the fates of the two noble houses. Duke Willow, like a wise keeper of secrets, has suggested that Damien's interest in Selena is hidden in the fact that he was destined to be raised without siblings. This lack of loved ones in his blood must have acted as a magnet, drawing him to the vortex of Selena's personality. Unraveling the tantalizing web of family relationships, the Duke decides to share his reflections with his wife. He recreates Celine's portrait in vivid colors, describing her in the village as an incorrigible troublemaker. Impressively vivid, the Duke emphasizes that despite her rebelliousness, Celine harbors an exceptional friendliness that envelops everyone around her in a soft blanket of warmth. This amalgam of qualities makes Celine a unique personality that has become Marion's trademark. Thanks to her irrepressible nature and affability, Celine shines like a ray of light into every corner of her home village, and there is not a single Marion resident who does not remember her name or know of the enchanting Celine. Suddenly, the words of the Duke and Duchess flew into a different sphere of conversation, crumbling like magic powder into a new plot. They recreated the image of the Baron, Selena's father, completely forgotten by the whirlwind of time and personal remorse. This Baron, remarkable in his dissimilarity to his contemporaries, enters our story as a knight defender raised under the wing of Duke Willow. Thus, inside the House of Mars, blossoms the story of an extraordinary Baron who became the soul of the family in its most difficult hour. His childhood remained frozen in a whirlwind of responsibilities and fear of the unknown. Taking over the house at such an early age, he blossomed like a rose among the snow-covered grounds, carrying not only chivalric wisdom, but also a shadow of the past, where every step becomes a question and answer on one of the pages of the Mars's destiny. And so, as if in a blur of fate, all the Baron's worries and metamorphoses came to a head. At the moment when the shadow of doubt threatened to envelop his decision to give up the title of Baron as an unbearable burden, a miracle happened. A new meaning appeared in his life, a baby, the embodiment of the future of the Marses. Like a feather in the wind, Celine played with all the children, toppling the boundaries between nobles and commoners. Her kindness, like sunlight, penetrated everyone's hearts, never stopping in front of the intricate walls of class divisions. However, in the children's lives, a challenge has struck. At the moment of Celine and a commoner boy's unfortunate disagreement, the ordinariness of everyday life was interrupted by a sinister shadow. With marksmanship that struck young skin, the commoner's child left bloody marks on Celine's cheek and neck. Nevertheless, night came on, and the father of the offended child appeared at the door of the Mars house, accompanied by the little one himself, peacefully begging pardon. But at this moment justice was taken by Celine. Perhaps influenced by the nobility of her soul or by something more mysterious, she came forward clad only in a single shirt and easily took the blame. Celine announced that all the events were mutual. The boy from the common people hit her only 4 times, while she in return suffered as many as 6. Thus Celine, like a guardian of justice, ended the incident, dispelling the clouds of misunderstanding and restoring harmony in the game of children's relationships. Celine, like a fairy tale heroine, knelt down on her knees beside the hurt boy. Her hands rose in a gesture of peace and harmony, like the bright wings of a defender of goodness. At that moment she uttered words that pierced the air with quiet power. If the boy, being less guilty, had already accepted repentance on his knees, then she, Celine, despite her innocence, was also ready to take responsibility. This exciting incident touched the Duchess's heart deeply, kindling in her soul the candle of approval that sparkled in her gaze like a star in the night sky. Duke Willow, continuing his narrative, emphasized that from that remarkable moment on, an unusual change began to take place in Mariana. A problem that adults could not solve was easily and naturally dissipated under the power of children's wisdom. This moment was evidence of the magic that lurks in children, capable of transforming even the most difficult circumstances, giving them a new, brighter hue. Celine, like a whirlwind of frenetic energy, suddenly burst into shouts, gathering her small subjects around her like a starry, glowing magnet. Her actions stunned Damien, who could not understand what mysterious endeavor she was undertaking. Abruptly stepping into the role of director of this unexpected drama, Celine introduced Bella and Johann, fellow knights from the School of Knighthood, to the young audience as if a magician were pulling the characters out of a hat. Celine's magical words, like a key to a secret world, opened the doors to the imagination where the children saw their new friends. However, in this magical moment, Bella, like an unwavering guardian of justice, expressed disbelief at the fact that Duke Willow's son was standing before her. Her words sounded like an invisible wind of change colliding with the usual order of things. Misunderstandings were introduced into this magical performance, becoming a new twist in a game where reality and fiction intertwined in a dance of mysterious events. Celine flared with displeasure like a fire of passion, but her outrage was not directed at Bella's frivolity toward Damien. No, it wasn't so much the situation itself as the fact that Bella had broken the established formula by calling him the Duke's son instead of the Duke's successor. Damien, with his equanimity, confirmed that everything was fine for him. At that moment, however, suddenly Bella, like a fashionable news courier, switched the subject, asking Damien what he was wearing and whether his style was the fashion of the capital. This question seemed to magnetically draw the children's attention to Damien's clothes, as if it was a small fashion revolution at the heart of their game. Celine, being like a lady of wisdom, met Bella's sudden irritation with a slight smile. With this incomprehension of her strange questions, Celine bore a firm assertion in the air. Bella was, after all, the dressmaker's daughter, and that was the root of her peculiar curiosity and wonder. Celine's attempts to quell Bella's excitement were in vain, and like the fire of restless passion flaring up again, Bella couldn't resist another attack. While Celine was momentarily distracted, Bella once again lunged at Damien with cavalier questions, probing his style and closet items. This ebullient interest was like a wind-up play carried among children's games, a reminder that even the most mundane questions could be a source of wonder and delight in a child's imagination. At this unexpected moment, like the spurt of a wild animal, Johann suddenly announced that he had to leave the game urgently, as iron ore had been brought to their house today and his father, an accident, had slightly injured his back, requiring his attention and support. Celine said goodbye to Johann, wishing him firmness and strength in helping his father. Suddenly, Bella, as if swept by an invisible wind of change, also announced that it was time for her to break up the game. The reason for this was undoubtedly an important missionary intention. She was to share with her mother all the secrets and information learned in the game from the Duke's successor, like childlike diplomacy soaring into the high realms of adult mysteries and stories. Celine, a little depressed by Johann and Bella's departure, determinedly channeled her energy into introducing Damien to the other little inhabitants of their fantasy world by talking about Mia's family's bakery. Damien listened in amazement at the existence of such a magical place as a bakery where buns had to be bought separately. The shock in his eyes was purely noble, for in his house apparently buns always appeared as if magically whenever he took a meal. It was a kind of childhood culture shock for him, opening the door to a new reality where even ordinary things can take on unexpected forms and rules. Suddenly, like a waft of magic wind, Celine remembered Damien's words about his imminent return to the capital after his vacation was over. The thought lit a spark of possibility in her eyes, and she slowly developed in her mind a picture of how wonderful it would be if Damien visited Marion again. Inviting the children, she shared her secret idea with them. She wanted each of them to contribute to creating memories for Damien, wishing that his visit to Marion would leave many happy memories in his soul. Celine, as the guardian of fragile happiness, only regretted that not everything was going as planned, and yet in those difficult moments she saw the bright prospect of Damien's eventual return to their cozy kingdom. The multicolored fabric of imagination into which their games had been tricked suddenly lost its richness when the last two children also announced their departure. They cheerfully and joyfully announced that they had discovered rare four-leaf clovers and were now eager to share their precious finds with their parents. Celine, though she felt the last rays of the game leaving, realized that these memories would become part of their children's hearts. So all that remained were the light whispers of the wind and the children's laughter and a smile in her eyes that kept the memory of that wonderful, though short-lived magic alive. Despite what had happened and the departure of a number of children, Marion's Children's Society was joined by another little prince, the Duke's successor, who possessed an outward beauty as if he had stepped out of the pages of fairy tales. Nevertheless, the Duke's successor somehow didn't quite know how to fit in with the village games, which drew attention to him and caused the children to come up with a secret nickname for him, Scone. This name, by which he became known, was used to surround him when some of his friends were displeased with his inexperience at games. Thus, even in this mysterious land of Marion, with its magical castles and fairy tale characters, there was its own system of children's nicknames and inside jokes. Secretly from Damien, as the children poured out their "how nice it would be to eat scone"-style thoughts, they were actually exchanging a secret signal that he wasn't tuned into. It was as if their world had started a secret correspondence, filled with innuendos and jokes that gave their friendship a special flavor. As they discussed the scone, Damien only thought about how wonderful it was that these local children enjoyed this magical treat so much. He, in his innocent naivete, had not realized that these conversations were often about him. It was a peculiar paradox. In his eyes, he saw the sincere joy of his friends, not realizing that they were actually joking about him. With the end of vacation and the onset of responsibilities, Damien inevitably returned to the capital, leaving the enchanting world of Marion behind. The meeting with his friends at the academy turned into a sparkling confusion when they learned that he had spent a whole month in the north. Damien, with his tales of his adventures in Marion, caused his friends a kaleidoscope of wonder. They could not understand what he could be doing in this unknown place where time seemed to have stopped. The difference in perception between the world of the modern capital and the mysterious expanse of the northern kingdom created a real contrast in their ideas of what is considered interesting and entertaining. Suddenly, Damien's friend noticed a tiny pebble around his neck and asked curiously what it was. With a smile filling his eyes with memories of Mariana, Damien replied that it was a sapphire, a stone he had brought back from a mysterious northern kingdom. His friend, however, with an apparently surprisingly perplexed smile, declared that it was just ordinary glass. But Demian, feeling the gem under his fingers and seeing Marian's magic in his eyes, insisted with certainty in his voice that it was a sapphire, the jewel from his adventurous journey. Demian himself, as if transported back in time by a magic stone, looked away, and for a moment was plunged into the memories of how this stone had become part of his life. The moment Celine had found this precious sapphire, she had claimed to have seen similar ones on her mother and had said with certainty that it was a sapphire. The stone was a parting gift from Celine, and so Damien had made sure to give it a special meaning. He had skillfully attached it to a leather rope, creating an exquisite necklace that now rested warmly around his neck. In each of its shimmering pebbles vibrated memories of those marvelous moments in Mariana, as if the little sapphire carried a piece of magic with it to the capital. With an anxious concern in his heart, Damien began to worry that the leather rope holding his precious sapphire might not stand the test of time and break. To avoid this misfortune, he decided to contact a skilled jeweler who could cut this small stone into noble gold. He didn't want this symbol of magic and friendship to turn into splinters and shatter. At that moment, as if by a light touch of wind, Demian finally heard the irritated remark of his friend, who was already getting angry that the Duke's successor was not paying attention to his words. Ignoring his friend's irritated words, Damien only turned and silently withdrew, noting that he shouldn't slow down since he was late for class. After a while, a misunderstanding between Damien and his friend erupted into a fierce argument. The friend could not understand why Damien, despite all the invitations, did not want to spend the vacation together. The mystery of the Duke's successor's inner world only increased the interest and misunderstanding contained in this break in friendship. Damien suddenly announced that his father, Duke Willow, was going to be arriving, stunning his friend with this unexpected news. The friend, full of surprise, began to insist on finding out the reason for this visit, claiming that Duke Willow usually only showed up for one occasion. However, Damien, with a smile, mouthed that the Northern Knight Academy was on vacation. This statement only increased his friend's bewilderment, making it seem as if the dialogue was floating on unrelated currents. Demian's friend, sighing and raising his eyebrows in a sign of misunderstanding, voiced his question, "What does a foreign academy's vacation have to do with our communication?" However, in response to this query, Demian chose to remain silent, as if his lips were frozen in an inscrutable conception. Suddenly there was a certainty in Demian's voice, and he said, "After the vacation, our paths will cross, and the moment the arrow of time pierces eternity, all secrets will be revealed." Contrary to this statement, his friend insisted, as if trying to persuade Demian to appear for a visit, as if beckoning him into his net. Thus, in a world of unsolved secrets and unspoken words, Demian silently unraveled his intrigue, leaving his friend waiting, but promising an urgent rendezvous after the vacation. Demian was immersed in the memory of that moment when he had received a letter from his father, in which the foreshadowing of the imminent arrival of his father's caravan with Baron Mars and his beautiful daughter Celine had illuminated his heart. With eager and unexpected excitement, Demian waited to meet this mysterious lady, in whose eyes, according to his father, sparkled some unknown worlds. And so the long-awaited day of the meeting came. Celine stepped out of the carriage and looked at the splendor of the capital as if she were in a world of wonders for the first time. The masterpieces of architecture, majestic buildings, and crowded streets left her in utter amazement. Celine's gaze, as if encased in the embrace of this new world, reflected her defeat before the grandeur of the capital. Celine, enraptured by the beauty outside the window, turned to her father and invited him to share the magic with her. But Baron Mars, instead of giving in to his daughter's enthusiasm, simply told her to take her seat in the carriage. Disappointment flashed in Celine's eyes, but she obediently obeyed, carrying in her heart the first impressions of her encounter with the unknown city. Suddenly Baron Mars, amid the atmosphere of tension in the carriage, turned to Duke Willow, expressing his doubts as to Celine's presence in their company. Fearing possible difficulties, the Baron voiced his concern. The Duke, in response, smiled placatingly, observing that children are meant to create difficulties. Emphasizing that his son Damien was in the capital, the Duke suggested that the children spend time together, as if anticipating how their presence would revitalize the established stereotypes of society. The Duke opined that it was best for Damien and Celine to start a friendship at the moment. After all, when Celine became Damien's night protector in the future, they would constantly meet. However, Baron Mars, full of anxiety, expressed his fear that Damien might get tired of Celine's constant presence. In response to these concerns, Celine grudgingly inquired why it was thought that the Duke's future heir might tire of her company. Celine, putting her hand on her heart, declared with confidence that Damien would never tire of her. She was certain that once people felt favored once, they remembered it in their hearts for a long time. Celine assured him that Damien would be extremely happy to see her and be in her company. In response, Baron Mars, expressing his bewilderment, asked what grace Damien had received from her. Celine, with a faint smile, replied that when he had come north, she had entertained him diligently. She was not only proud of her ability to provide pleasure, but also confident that Damien had found something special in her company. Upon hearing such an answer, Baron Mars immediately admitted his mistake and apologized to the Duke for his biased judgment. However, the Duke, instead of taking the apology seriously, simply laughed. His laughter sounded like a light, merry wave playing on the surface of a quiet body of water, despite the shadow of doubt that had just shrouded their conversation. Celine's gaze darted like an arrow back into the embrace of the city's beauty, and in her stirring gaze flashed admiration like stars floating in the night sky ocean. Suddenly, a majestic clock tower opened before her like a creature of time, an ancient guardian of past and future. Her eyes were dumbfounded by the sight of this architectural work of art rising majestically to the heavens, as if her eyes had become windows to a world of wonder. She could not resist this splendor and turned to her father, Baron Mars, as if to a wise man who held the keys to the secrets of the universe. She exclaimed that this watch was undoubtedly forged by God himself, radiating his unknowable gaze through the loops of time. Thus, Celine's words penetrated her father's mind like the reverent whisper of a sanctuary, and a hymn of majesty, woven from the golden threads of eternity, rang out in the imagination of Baron Mars. Suddenly, Duke Willow's voice rang out like a light breeze running through the foliage of a tree high. He looked closely at Celine, wondering at the mystery of time, and asked why she perceived this majestic tower as a clock. Celine, in answer to the Duke's question, revealed the secret of her wise eye. She had been indoctrinated at night school that in the wilderness, lost among forests and fields, time could be measured with a simple stick, drawing its shadows on the ground. Looking at this architectural masterpiece, however, she saw something more than a simple tool. Her eyes reflected the belief that this tower, like a gift from God himself, was here to become a majestic timekeeper, linking the destinies of men to the vast expanse of space. Duke Willow's sudden request sounded like a percussive chord in Celine's quiet symphony. Stunned by the mystical beauty of the tower, her inner world froze for a moment, as if an invisible whirlwind of surprise made her heart beat harder. "This is the Tower of the Academy," the Duke announced, as if revealing a veil of mystery. This pronouncement exploded in the air like a firework of colorful illusions. Celine submitted to the new reality, and her mind seemed to be entangled in its own web of questions. She, with a glance at the Duke, dared to lift the veil of questioning. Why do they need such a tall tower? The Duke, in reply, revealed the secret like a wise magician who had broken the inhibitions of time. He said that it was rumored that the powerful magician who had built the academy had not only invested this tower with the power of knowledge, but also with a height woven with charms and magic, giving it a majestic appearance, like a masterpiece created in the very depths of magic. In an era set back 800 years, a great mage whose mystical powers aided the emperor in the fledgling country manifested. In the flames of war, when every step mattered, the mage sparkled with his wisdom, contributing to strengthening the roots of the new nation. After the end of the war events, he settled in the capital like a guardian of knowledge, elevating the academy, a holy sanctuary where the spirit of magic joined the streams of time. Amidst the storms and maelstroms of war, centuries ago, a legend spread of how, in those days, dragons floated free in the skies, winged creations that gave a mysterious grandeur to the period. In the time of the great mage and the towering academy, the shadows of dragons served as a symbol, like guards watching over the uncharted horizons of this brilliant era. The story of the great magician and the magical academy so shocked Celine that a fire of admiration flashed in her eyes like a sparkling star in the heavens. Celine, full of incredible impressions, turned to the Duke, expressing her curiosity about the possibility of seeing the fireball if she decided to go to the academy. This question, like a mysterious melody, remained hanging in the air, making the Duke lose his ability to answer for a moment. During this moment of tense silence, Celine's eyes sparkled with impatience, like stars waiting for their time. The Duke, for his part, found himself in a stupor, as if faced with a riddle to which there was no easy answer. Baron Mars clarified, stating that everything Celine had read from the books was within the realm of literary reality. However, when this information was brought to the Duke's attention, he replied that there was no such thing available at the Academy. This answer, like an invisible stone, fell into the water of her expectations. Despite the negative answer, Celine asked about the possibility of learning to shoot ice arrows. However, when she heard that no such splendor awaited her at the Academy, her eyes reflected deep disappointment, as if an unexpected darkness had shrouded the sparkling light of her dreams. The Duke explained that the Academy was mastering a completely different field of magic. In his words, the students were learning the secrets of creating more superior metal alloys, like blacksmiths of magic ingots. This new realm of magic was like a magic string, opening the doors to a world of technological wonders before them. Mesmerized by the fresh flow of knowledge, the Duke wrapped the new iron-making technology in words, revealing the secrets of the processes like a magnificent work of art. Despite the intriguing narrative, however, Celine could not share his enthusiasm. Her eyes reflected only a fleeting curiosity, like an echo of unfulfilled expectations that eclipsed the light of her magical dreams. Celine's sudden certainty exploded into the air, as if the inner fire of her thoughts had burst free. She had assumed that the mage who had laid the foundation of the Academy might have been a humble lord of the mysteries, solely because, in her opinion, if he possessed wealth, he would have given his great creation a wider expanse. To the astonishment of those around her, she announced that if fate were to impose upon her the role of this great magician, she would choose a place in the north, where the barren lands defied the plow and the cold whistled its icy tune. In her imagination, these places, uncomfortable for farming, would become the perfect haven for an academy where magic and knowledge could flourish like a magical garden blooming in the northern expanse. The Duke's face creased in a haze of incomprehension when Celine spoke her thoughts. The complexity of his expression was like a tangle of riddles that no one dared to speak aloud. He said that if Celine had been born in those times of a great mage, his ear would have been listening to her wise words. A sudden realization pierced Celine like the light of the moon in a dark night. It suddenly became clear to her if Damien had perhaps once been a powerful great mage, he might have simply lost his power in the flow of time. And then the thought of his weakness suddenly burst into her musings as the result of a long-ago loss, like an ancient spell that had faded with time. Celine took in her resolve like a meteor piercing the heavens of her reflection. Decisions flashed in her eyes like stars in a vast firmament. She had, in all her wisdom, decided that Damien's surroundings were to blame, impossible to concentrate in, like the deafening hum of the capital's bustle. It was here, in the gloom and intertwining worries of the city, that the spark of his dream of mastery with the sword was fading. The melody of self-sacrifice rang out in her resolutions like a hymn of struggle. She resolved to try harder, like a whirlwind crashing down on obstacles, so that, like a magic wizard, she could bring light to the shadows of his failures, better guiding his steel in the flow of training. That determination, like a firefly in the darkness, illuminated her path to help Damien elevate his skill and overcome the darkness that bound his soul. The long-awaited moment of the meeting came, which brought with it unexpected shades of emotion. Surprisingly, the usually stormy and restless Celine offered a bow before Damien, expressing her respect according to etiquette. Damien himself, meeting her eyes, noted that it had been a long time since they had seen each other by saying her name. But while he called her name, Celine, immersed in her own thoughts, just stared at him, as if unfolding the pages of his past. She realized that a lot of time had passed, watching herself grow and become different. As she gazed at Damien, however, she couldn't help but notice that the Duke's successor had grown as well, but not just physically. There was a glimmer of strength and experience in his eyes, as if he had forged his skill in the fire of his own trials. Baron Mars's unexpected announcement that it was time to leave sounded like an unforeseen storm in their welcomed calm. Celine, like the roots of an ingrown tree, stiffened in one place, unwilling to leave her friend and worried like a leaf in the wind. At that moment, however, Baron Mars, like a reader of hidden signs, noticed that their luggage was being carried toward Willow Castle. This sudden observation, like a fire in the darkness, illuminated their path, dispelling their doubts. Celine, her eyes filled with wonder, realized that this meeting was not accidental at all, but rather fateful. The noble Duke Willow announced his generous decision. In view of the arrival of a young heir from the house of Baron Mars, it was decided to forego excesses and to perfect communication in the comfort of the Duke's castle. The words that came out of his mouth filled the space with meaning, like a magical spell, foreshadowing the importance of the decision. The instantaneous reaction of 10-year-old Celine, the Baron's daughter, gave what was happening a special depth. Her gratitude was not only a polite response to the Duke's words, but also a manifestation of her wisdom, her sense of the subtleties of relationships. Suddenly, the Duke's words became a kind of guidepost, leading to new possibilities of communication between her brother, little Damien, and Willow's noble heir. Thus, the Duke's statement not only reflected generosity and hospitality, but also cracked open a whirlwind of hidden possibilities in the future relationship between the children of the two noble families. As she passed through the stately doors of the magnificent manor, Celine was struck by the incredible contrast between what the Duke had told her and what was unfolding before her eyes in all its glory. Shocked by the apparent splendor, she expressed her bewilderment by pointing out the contradiction between the Duke's words and reality. Instead of the expected modesty, the estate appeared to Celine as an incredible display of luxury. Damien, for his part, expressed his surprise that Celine did not see the estate as impressive. Her words created a tense atmosphere where the notion of modesty as an important part of communication was lost. Celine's words called for an awareness of the differences in perception, and the manor became a smooth backdrop for a discussion of what seemed to be hidden from the Duke's and Celine's gaze. Celine, having no tolerance for luxury at Duke Willow Manor, expressed her inability to recognize its modesty. It was hard for her to consider modest a place that could easily fit her entire hometown and still have empty rooms. The remark echoed like a tinkling echo through the vastness of the luxurious barn, giving food for thought as to what was excessive and what was a measure of modesty. In reply, Damien, as if engaged in a dance of comparisons, suggested that the Earl Rider's mansion was almost twice the size of the Duke's estate. It was a peculiar reply that seemed to fit into the mosaic pattern of the topic under discussion. Each phrase became a drop of paint on the canvas, on which the contours of the inner world of the characters, their views and values were drawn. Celine met Damien's answer about the superiority of Earl Rider's mansion with surprise, expressed as a question: where did he get his information about the interior of this magnificent building? In response to this question, Damien, as if revealing a secret, announced that Russell Rider was a fellow student at the training academy. This unexpected connection seemed to open a new chapter in their conversation, creating a mosaic of threads of friendship, education, and social connections. The information about her friendship with Russell Rider seemed to magically knock the words out of Celine's head, creating a sense of extraordinary upheaval in her inner world. Damien refreshed the silence with a question, waiting for Celine's response, and asked if her silence was a reaction to the fact of his friendship with Russell. In response, Celine emphasized that her surprise was merely unexpected, since she had long been led to believe that the people of the capital were selfish people who cared nothing for others. Damien, shaking his head slightly in an attempt to comprehend the meaning of her words, put that aspect aside for the time being and, preferring not to broach the difficult issues, gazed into Celine's eyes. His reflections, like a whirlwind, enriched their dialogue with new shades, and the note that Celine was unusual shook his inner landscape, leaving many mysteries in the air. Suddenly, Celine expressed a desire to meet Russell, as if an invisible arrow had taken their conversation in an unexpected direction. Disappointment flashed in Damien's eyes as he assessed the unexpected turn of events and asked why she would want to do that. Celine, looking directly into his eyes, as if penetrating to the very core of her desires, replied that she simply wanted to understand how connections and friendships were formed in the world beyond their ordinary environment. Her words hung in the air like the glitter of stars in the night sky, a foretaste of something unknown. In that instant, their dialogue became a tiny passage in a book about adventure and the quest to understand the mysterious ways of friendship. Celine, reacting to the disappointment in Damien's eyes, stated that if Russell was Damien's friend, she wanted to ask Russell to keep the alliance alive and be their common sign. This suggestion struck Demian to the core, his thoughts frozen as if waiting for a new chapter to unfold. Celine continued without pausing, expressing her willingness to stay by Demian's side as a friendly figure until he took the path of a knight protector. It seemed to be important to her at this moment in time that there was always someone around Demian, ready to support and protect. These words created a protective aura around them, as if Celine was summoning a warrior spirit that could come to her aid in times of need. Suddenly Celine, as if feeling the weight of mystery on her, began to turn around slowly, as if in her own dance with secrets, before uttering something incredibly secret. At this moment, a mysterious atmosphere hung in the air, like a curtain concealing an unexplored world of mystery. Moving down closer to Damien's ear, Celine whispered something that made even the air around her seem filled with intrigue. Her words, like sounds from another dimension, absorbed Damien's attention, creating in his mind an expectation of something that would pave the way for Celine's new side to be revealed. She pronounced that Damien didn't have to appreciate his only friend. It didn't take long for Damien's gloomy reflection to be disappointed when he asked Celine where she got this belief that he had only one friend. In answer to his question, suddenly Celine seemed to glow with inner joy, shifting into a state of lightness and joy. With a slight hint of irony in her voice, she asked Damien if he really had any other friends. Then, with a quiet exhale, she announced cheerfully that, according to her information, Damien had as many as 2 friends. This sudden change in her mood, like an inner light, gave an extra touch of mystery to the whole situation. Damien, who knew much more than just the 2 friends, was too exhausted to go into explanations in front of Celine. Thus, an inexpressible mystery hung between them like the threads of a cloth that hung in the air. Celine, as if the epitome of revelation, remarked that even if Damien was left behind by one of his friends, there would still be a second. This statement struck her as so startling that her surprise was almost palpable, for judging by how ineptly Damien had interacted with her and her friends, it seemed to her that he had never had true companions or learned the magic of friendship. Her confidence in this was so high that she couldn't even imagine how Damien could be a friend. Unexpectedly, she decided to find out the name of Damien's other friend, hoping that the event would at least partially unravel the mystery of his social life. Damien answered her question with an awkward grin, making it seem as if he was holding a piece of the puzzle he had no intention of revealing. Suddenly, Damien, contorting his face into a strange comical look, abruptly announced that he had no second friend at all. This statement struck Celine so hard that her shock was almost palpable. She could apparently feel the air fill with uncertainty, like the evening light shattering, leaving only darkness inside. Damien, as if getting into a conversation he seemed uncomfortable with, began to tell me that he didn't have anyone he could call a friend at all. It turned out that even Russell, who had been mentioned earlier, was just an acquaintance from the academy. These words, like dark shadows, made changes to the picture Celine had been building in her head, leaving her alone before a new, unexpected reality. Celine, like a whirlwind fairy, waved her arms in a sign of her bewilderment, creating a dance of magic and childlike sincerity around her. Damien, drowning in the vast eyes of her disbelief, stood like an enigmatic figurehead in her theatrical performance. At that moment, like a drawer of secrets, Celine's statement bursts out, saying that Damien probably feels lonely during the vacation without his imaginary friends. And like stars scattered across the heavens, her words leave a glittering trail of unbelievable assertions. Celine, like a whirlwind of tenderness, was suddenly enveloped in an atmosphere of remorse, apologizing for her words as if she had stepped into the forbidden land of Damien's inner feelings. There was a flicker of concern in her eyes, but he, like a skilled actor, picked up her mood with a slight irony, as if to emphasize the authenticity of her observations. "You're right, Celine," he said, painting a look of slight confusion on his face, as if deliberately revealing a page of his soul. "I really don't have any friends, and I'm forced to stay at home." His words were like a magnet, attracting attention, creating an aura of mystery and unraveling around him, like the pages of an unwritten book of his own lonely history. In reality, however, Damien is passionate about training with the sword, floating to the rhythm of the streets and taking part in gatherings where his position as a potential successor to the Duke sets him apart from many. His days are filled with untold adventures, where each swing of the sword becomes part of an intricate dance of ascension. The sudden disappointment in Celine's eyes upon hearing his words was like the darkness of night that shrouded their meeting. A shadow of doubt was growing in her heart, as if she had lost her place in Damien's world. Yet he, like a virtuoso of his own performance, remained steadfast in his deeds, unaware of the storm that passed through Celine's soul. Damien's heavy sigh blew like wind in a field of drought, reminding him of the difficulty of understanding his own feelings. His eyes flashed with the reflection of an inner struggle, like water waiting for a rush of emotion. His heart, like a tree of wind, moved under the pressure of his thoughts. "How long will you stay here?" Damien asked quietly, as if putting his soul under the light of the moon. In answer to this question, Celine, like a mysterious fairy, replied that she did not know how long she was to stay here, emphasizing her dependence on her father's affairs. Their dialogue thus became a kind of dance symphony, where words hung in the air like stars in the vast night, ready to tell their stories. Damien, upon hearing that Celine will be staying in the capital, bursts into rapture like a sudden bloom of spring flowers. When asked by a surprised Celine why such joy, Damien answers with a sincere smile that for him Marion was a place where his heart found joy like never before. When asked about the reasons for his sudden uplift in mood, Damien answered only with a smile, like untold words of mysterious admiration. And at that moment, like an artist creating his picture of life, he whispers that the house in the capital has become his special refuge, filling his life with freshness and joy, and then momentarily immerses himself in the magical world of their shared journey. In response to his words, Celine's gaze becomes as gentle as the first rays of morning light, and a shadow of slightly suppressed admiration flickers in her eyes. Celine turned away like a pink wind petal, covered in a blush as Damien grew unexpectedly close. His presence, like an invisible fire, touched her senses, making her heart beat faster like the first spring rain. Suddenly, like a change in the weather, he began to express his discontent, sharing that he missed his memories with his classmates. Celine suddenly felt a shadow of unease, as if a fear of his tears had awakened in her. She felt as if he were crying inside, and it swept over her like a momentary gust of wind before a thunderstorm. As if performing a spell, Celine urgently assured Damien that she would play with him and accompany him to practice. There was sincerity in her promises, as if the magic of words were creating a new look for their future meetings. However, the look Damien raised at her interjected a fraction of doubt into the moment, as if the winds of change were tearing at the leaves of a tree. "Really?" Damien asked, as if unraveling the mysteries of her words. However, as a knowledgeable artist, he had already foreseen this outcome, skillfully manipulating the events so that they would be crowned with the desired result. Celine, sensing the nonverbal question in his eyes, pulled out a handkerchief and began to carefully wipe away Damien's tears. Her voice, like a caressing melody, comforted him, telling him that she had told the truth and so he should not shed tears. It was a moonlit night, like a magical splendor spreading its mysterious veil over the dark element of the sky. The moon, like a crown of silver, adorned the night sky with its luster, like a jewel in the crown of the night. Its light, soft and subtle, spread across the surface of the earth like delicate lace woven into the fibers of the night air. In this light, nature seemed frozen in a moment of magic, and the shadows took on mysterious shapes, like mysterious writings on the pages of the night's chronicle. Celine, preparing for sleep, became part of this magical evening. Her eyes reflected the twinkle of stars and moonlight, as if she was part of nature's evening symphony. The light of the moon, gently illuminating her tranquil face, made the moment even more magical, as if she was a magical fairy born in the nightlight. Her father sat beside her, majestically drowned in clouds of memories. He reminded her of her mother, whose words sounded like a sacred mantra. He warned her, like a guardian of the family hearth, not to bring any trouble to Willow's family. And at this hour, under the moonlight, like an incantation, she promised herself that she would be careful, like a guardian of the magic forest, not to disturb the harmony and peace that reigned under the moon's rule. Baron Mars ran his hand gently through Celine's hair, like tree branches weaving threads of tenderness in this night's silence. His gaze carried ancient wisdom, as if his eyes reflected a book of family traditions. In parting, he reminded her that it was important to conduct herself in a high-minded manner, reflecting gratitude to the entire Willow household. The Baron's words spoke of respect for the roots, as if he were maintaining a delicate web of ties between the families. Before promising the gift, he expressed his belief that Celine, being obedient and prudent, deserved special attention. And this gift, as a symbol of great friendship, should be a testament to their family history, created in every moment.